So,
You good?
yeah, we may just need
Okay.
to get some, if that's good. Lighting wise, I don't have,
Well,
Would
you
you like him to sit somewhere by where he's getting light?
no,
there is good.
that's
Yeah.
There we are.
that's better. All right. Okay. So now we'll make this official. All right.
Yeah, why not?
So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thanks, Pat.
You're
Hello,
welcome.
hello everyone. This is Dwight Woods, Jeet Kune Rebel, and welcome to the this is the official start of episode 1 of the Jeet Kune Dialogues. Over the past few months, what I've noticed is since we started doing the I Love Jeet Kune broadcast, I've come to notice that there's still a ton of people out there who cannot get their fill of information on matters Jeet Kune. So we'll continue to do the broadcast, but I thought that another way to get even more JKD information out there would be to invite people that I consider to be Jeet Kune notables to come on and give the world their points of view on all things Jeet Kune. Right, so I'm pleased to have as my first guest, episode number 1, Wayne Quinton of Unified Martial Art Barbados. And as we talk, you guys will get to see why he was my first choice for episode 1, right? So it's really, this is just two Jeet Kune enthusiasts kind of having a conversation with each other and with as many as our Jeet Kune friends that chime in and that watch it after we post it up, right? So welcome, Mr. Quinton.
Thank you,
How you doing?
I'm
Okay.
good.
So so tell the world what that you and I recently had it confirmed that we are actually related.
Yeah, apparently you're telling me that. You mentioned that you encountered a Wayne Quinton from Trinidad who contacted you, and
Right.
what I remember from history and people I've met in Trinidad who were Quintons was that I know 10% of the Barbadian population migrated to Trinidad in the late 19th century. That's from about 1880 or so, for work purposes.
Yeah.
So it's not surprising, therefore, to hear that since you're related to Quinton, that we would be related. But
Right.
yeah, that would explain a lot about the similarity in thought and in interest.
Yeah, but not hairstyle, as that old picture. You knew that was the picture I was going to use, right?
Yes, I did. That's one of my favorites, actually.
Right, mine too. Right? Yeah, the one where we look like twins, and then we have one of our favorite people in the world sandwiched between us.
Yes, with the halo around his head, no less.
Exactly, right. So okay, so let's do this, because I've known you since 1985. As a matter of fact, when I tell people the story about how we met, this is what I tell them. It was September or October of 1985. So you stop me anytime that I say something that's incorrect.
August 25th, 1985. Barbados
Okay,
Martial Arts Federation's Martial Art Expo.
Okay, right. So so everybody's doing their demos, and the Shotokan groups got like 10, 12, 20 people in their group, and then it's just me and Glenn.
Yes.
And so I start on the microphone, and then after a couple of minutes, I drop the microphone and I jump off the stage in front of the crowd, and I go, "Can everybody hear me okay?"
Sounds about right.
True?
That sounds about right.
Okay, right. So what I tell people is that as continued to happen with us, whenever we did demonstrations, we hardly ever gained like new students or anything from as a result of the demonstration. But you came up to me afterwards, and I think you started training with me either the next day, but definitely the next week, correct?
Yeah, the next week. I called over the weekend, and about just next week. That's why our official start date is the 1st of September.
1st of September 1985.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we're going on 33 years, right? Isn't it amazing how I'm still the same age?
Quite true. And look the same, yeah.
Right, exactly, right? I'm exactly the same. Okay. So why did you go what at that time, right? In August of 1985, what were you doing in the martial art world?
Well, at that time, I was training in a system called, what I was told was called Shaolin Long Fist Kung Fu.
Okay.
That really but that turned out to be was what we would call the backyard martial artists, the guys who trained, got together and trained, who used books, and they went to the cinema, watch movies, and they would then
Right.
regurgitate what they practiced. And they would tell you very often about this person they trained with who'd come to Barbados on holiday, which may or may not have been true. And then
Right.
they would share their knowledge. Um,
Okay.
so that's where I started training. After the books, I went looking for a teacher. I went around to a couple of schools. I found this guy who will remain nameless, just in case.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, just
and I started training with him. And it was an interesting experience because a lot of people who train with him, as you would know in Barbados, we have a lot of dabblers. So we have guys going from this system going to train for a couple of months with this guy, and when they're not satisfied with that person, they go to another person and so on. So even within that group, there were guys who had done judo, there were guys who had done karate, there were guys who had done kempo and so on who were training. And so I became the beneficiary of their experiences, which generally meant that I was the youngest. I was
okay.
15, so I was about 13, 14 at that age, at that time. And most of these guys were adults, and I became their punching bags. And but I learned from the experience because it built a toughness. And then what was great for me was as I did some of the strange or weird things that they wanted, and I did it, and I was successful with it. Then it was beneficial in the sense that, hey, I could pull this stuff off against guys who were older. Boy power, they say, and man power are two different things. And as a youngster, that I could actually pull off some things against them, built my confidence. So even though I knew from a technical perspective there was something not quite right in the process of what I was learning, in terms of building my confidence, building my body, because back in those days, you trained for 2 hours, and usually an hour and a half of that was physical conditioning, and then the last 30 minutes was technique.
Right.
So
okay. Right.
So
that's where you were when you came to the expo.
Yeah, I was in a process of at that stage, I'd made up my mind that I wasn't, because I started doing a lot more researching. I was reading books and magazines and watching Bruce Lee movies, and so on.
You would come across Jeet Kune by.
I believe I had. I think my best friend had given me his dad's martial art magazine, which I have somewhere on the shelf. I should be able to pull it up. And it had reference. It was actually a magazine on Kung Fu, but it featured Bruce Lee on the cover. And there was a whole excerpt focused on, particularly on the Enter the Dragon movie. So there was a lot of video, pictures, reference to Bruce Lee in there. Not totally accurate in some cases, but it pointed me out to this guy called Bruce Lee, because as a youngster, maybe about 10 years old, at school, all the kids would come back and talk about this. They went to the cinema and they saw this movie with this guy called Bruce Lee, this Game of Death with Bruce Lee, and how amazing Bruce Lee was. And I was like, wow, I think this is somebody I want. This is something I want to do. This is somebody I want to see. At that time, of course, the cinema wasn't accessible to me at that age. And then from there, I got this book about this Bruce Lee I had heard them talking about, and I read, and what I was reading about Bruce Lee was very much in sync with my thought about martial art at the time and where I thought my martial art training should go. So that's why the process started. By the time I was 13 then, I started after training all the books on my own. I started training with that was a Shaolin Long Fist Kung Fu instructor, and but by 2 years later, by 80, I probably trained with him from 83 to 84, 85. I started questioning a lot. So I was like, well, this isn't quite what I'm looking for. There must be something better out there, something more in line with what I'm thinking. And so I started going.
Tell me.
Go ahead. The one good thing about that instructor was even though he would take me to other schools, watch other people train.
Hang on a second. Hang on a second, because you're okay. I'm having a little bit of difficulty. It might be your internet connection, so I'm having a little bit of difficulty. So I'm going to try to keep you to shorter answers.
Okay.
Okay. Right. You are as much a student of martial art as you are an instructor.
Yes.
So I'm going to list stuff and you tell me if I'm correct. Right. So you trained for a while in Aikido with a guy from the Japanese consulate or the Japanese embassy.
This was well, I actually trained with two Aikido instructors here in Barbados. One was Soffietti Sensei, Giuseppe Soffietti, and he's Italian, but he lived in South Africa for a very long time, and he was the first person I trained in Aikido with. And then there was Izumi Sensei, Hiroaki Izumi, who's now passed maybe about three years ago, and he was a professor, and he was I believe he might have been associate. I think he was more in finance, and then he was a professor. He went to be a professor in Saudi Arabia. But he was like a fourth. He was like fourth. So he was one of the highest ranked Aikido instructors globally.
That's Aikido instructor number one.
Soffietti Sensei, and then number two was Izumi Sensei. He was a Japanese Canadian I studied with.
Okay, and then you're currently a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right?
Correct. That's
and that's through.
Well, I received
through
Professor Gary Padilla and Professor John Jack Machado.
Okay.
Professor Padilla is based at the Sauna Academy in LA. So he's basically my mentor now in his BJJ, and I got that at the last workshop that I went to in LA.
How many times a year do you go out to LA?
If I'm lucky, once a year. If I'm really lucky, twice.
And you've been doing that
since about 94. Since about 1994.
Okay, so for 20-something years, once or twice a year, you've been making the trek to LA from Barbados.
As much as possible. There are some gaps in there where I couldn't make it for a little while. You know, we island people are not as financially sound, as some other people may be. Tickets here are pretty expensive, but for the most part, maybe of those 20 or 30 years, I might have gone maybe 18 to 22 of those years. Sorry, yeah. If there were 20 years, sorry, maybe about 75%.
What about? All right. What during that time? This is another one I need you to correct me on if I'm wrong. Aren't you the first person in Barbados to be a full-time professional martial artist?
Depending on the degree of your definition.
Of full-time
I would
or
be
professional.
Full-time, yeah. I was probably the first person to actually, one of the first persons to actually have a facility dedicated to teaching martial art. From that perspective, yes. I was probably the first, if not the second, because I believe Sifu Liebert Map of the Wushu Tai Chi Federation had built a facility in St. Philip. So I'm not sure if that facility was built before I opened my school in Bridgetown or not.
Right.
If I wasn't the first,
Okay.
I would have been the second. But obviously there were
Okay.
other people teaching martial arts before then, but they were doing that on a
Right.
ad hoc or part-time basis.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about why, because even today in the first world, right, in first world countries, there's still a lot of people who can't even get a school started, and then if they are lucky enough to get a school started, they can't always keep it going. So you are in, for lack of a different expression, right? You're in a third world country, as they call it, or is Barbados considered first world or second world? I don't even know.
Developing. So that I guess you could say would be second world.
Okay.
I haven't seen a second world or third world yet, but that in terms of the definition, it would be a developing country.
Well, whatever. So small, right? Okay, all right. So, tell me a little bit about initial frustrations with that, and why you decided to keep going with it. Because a lot of people would have found something else to do by now.
I have a very loving and patient wife. Maybe that's the first thing.
Okay.
So she buys into my dream, and my passion for martial art. Yeah, my passion for martial art, really. I love martial arts, and the only way I can do it to the extent that I want to do it to achieve what I want to achieve is to teach. Because the reality is I never wanted to be a teacher, just so you know. I never wanted to be a teacher. I never really wanted to open a school. This happened because I wanted to train, and the only way I could train was to teach people what I knew, because there was nobody else doing what I was doing here. So I just fell into it. I was teaching, and then to be able to train the number of hours and the amount and the time that I wanted to, the only way to make that happen was to make a career out of actually training in the martial art. So the business was a byproduct initially, and then it just grew from there. And I've stuck with it because I love what it brings to my community, the changes and how it impacts on my students, really, to see the changes that occur through the.
That sounds a little bit familiar, right? That sounds to me like something that Dan Inosanto might say, that his passion for martial art is the thing that led him to start teaching it full time.
That may very well be true, because
have you
well, I think maybe in conversations over the years he might have alluded to that, and I might have heard it said. But again, you know, birds of a feather, they say, flock together. So it wouldn't be too surprising that would be the case. I said I wouldn't be surprised that that wouldn't have been the case for you as well.
Well, with me, I only know how to do two things, right? I know how to work at Eastern Airlines, and I know how to do martial art. And so since Eastern Airlines is no longer around, right, I can't do that. But that's it. That's all I've ever known, right? Just those two things. So I'm pretty stuck with martial art, or martial art is stuck with me, right? Do you remember first time meeting Inosanto?
Very much so. That was a very painful experience to a degree. I think that would have been around 1992, and this was after an experience I had in New York with a guy who was a Jeet Kune instructor, who was very dismissive of Sifudan, and I was very defensive of Sifudan based on not meeting him or knowing him, but on having read his books and magazines and so on. So I was very defensive of him in this experience in New York. And then, like the year later, I go to Miami to the seminar you host, the annual seminar you hosted in Miami, and meet him for the first time. And I was lucky or fortunate because I tagged along with you everywhere. So I got to go pick up. I got to go meet him at the airport. And
Right.
in my mind, reading and seeing Sifudan and everything else, this was this like 6 foot tall guy, you know, all power
Yeah.
muscle and
Right.
killing ability. And out walks out of the airport this 5 foot, maybe four, if that much guy, very timid
Yeah.
in his movement. And I'm going like, this is Danny Mazzano, you know?
Yeah.
And
You thought he was bigger.
yeah, you know, and so my impression, my image of him in my mind and the reality of what his image was in reality was very different, and
Yeah.
I hadn't reconciled that. And I don't know, maybe he read my mind because the next day at the seminar, and he was introducing shoot wrestling, and I think it was shoot wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at that time. Was now going into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I believe, and definitely was promoting the shoot wrestling. And he calls me up to demonstrate on. And we were doing escapes from the behind, and he did like
Yeah.
leg locks on me. And here he is applying the leg locks, pressuring into the nerve of my calf with his elbow, and I'm in pain. And I'm going, yeah, this hurts, but wow, you know. And I'm laughing and giggling like a little, you know, boy, realizing that yeah, this man is as good as I thought he was, everything I read about
Right.
him, you know, his size doesn't really matter, you know, and I should have known
Right.
that from the start, you know, but he was amazing.
So-
and that experience was phenomenal.
Okay. So now, I gotta ask you about the influence of Kali through Sifu and Asano, and then what that led to your doing in the Bajan stick licking.
Okay. Well, first up, as I said to you, my experience with Sifudan came, and I'm gonna just turn for a quick second.
Yeah.
The first 3 books I ever got when you broke the news to me that you were leaving Barbados, and I bought up, tried to buy as much as I could and get as much info as I could. There were 3 books you got for me, and this was one of them, Filipino martial
Okay.
art.
Right.
The other 2 I have on the shelf as well. So I was
Okay.
reading through that book, and obviously I remember actually one day we were doing Kali, training in the Kali, and you stepped in, and a gentleman had come by, a mature gentleman, to a family member of yours, and he saw me practicing with the double stick, and he goes on, oh, stick licking, man. When I was a little boy, I redid such and such and such and such. And I'm thinking in my head, he doesn't know what he's talking about because I'm doing Kali. Because I wasn't
Right.
really fully aware of a stick fighting method in Barbados. So that was in my
Right.
head. This guy was just trying to make conversation. And
Yeah.
then as I went along, I heard more and more references to this Barbadian stick fighting method, which we call Bajan stick licking. And in reading Sifudan's book, there was a reference there how he got into the Filipino martial arts, which was Ed Parker had introduced him and told him, well, hey, this is native to the Philippines. This is a part of your culture. Why don't you embrace it and find out more about it? And that's how he started to really get into the Filipino martial arts and examine it. So I said to myself, well, hey, I love martial arts. I'm studying all these different martial art disciplines from, you know, other countries. Shouldn't I be doing the same
Right.
thing? And so that is where my journey began in terms of trying to find out a lot more about our local martial sciences.
Right. So Sifu and Asano and his examination of his cultural art was the inspiration for you to do similarly.
Yes. See, he's a
Okay.
great beacon.
Yeah.
He's definitely a finger pointing to the moon.
Right. All right. Okay. I have another question for you. Was it me or was it you who came up with the phrase using martial art as, right? So for those of you who don't right? So UMAA is the abbreviation for Unified Martial Art Academy. So I started UMAA down in Barbados trained Wayne for about 9 months, and then left him on his own. And he has continued and using the school name. So he runs what we could call the original branch, right, of UMAA. So was it me or was it you that came up with the UMAA, using martial art as?
I believe that was you. You know, I pill for all your stuff.
Well, yeah, that's what you do. Right? You steal, or you research or whatever, right? Okay, all right. So we have on the I Love Jeet Kune platform, right? We have a mixed audience. There are people on here who are solo practitioners. There are people who own their own schools, right? Then there's some who are just like Bruce Lee enthusiasts. They might not actually be training or what have you, right? So if you had to advise anybody on, let's do this first, right? Getting started in Jeet Kune. So if it was a solo practitioner, so this is somebody who might have one or two partners that wants to train. If you had to advise them on getting started, what advice would you have for them?
One, just do it. Simplest answer. Just do it. I always remind people when I started out, when you left, I started out with two air shields, a pair of focus mitts, I think it was, and 2 pair of Kali sticks, and one person who was interested in training with me. That's how we started, and we started on the Garrison Savannah, which is where the horses race. So we didn't have a roof over our head or anything. We just went where the rugby guys trained, and that's where we started. And what did I do? I took my notebooks from what I learned after many months of you pushing me to get a notebook. I remember scurrying the last month before you left to take all these notes about all I had been training. So, take advantage of every opportunity there is to learn. Every magazine I could get my hand on, every book I could get my hand on, I read from cover to cover and I just grasped as much information as I could.
What about advice for a school owner? Because here's what I'm driving at. You've been going back and forth between the U.S. and Barbados in pursuit of Jeet Kune for decades. Do you think that the instructor experience or the student experience, do you think the experience is radically different based on part of the world, or are they actually similar?
I think in many ways it's very similar. It's the biggest challenge of being in any business is knowing the market. That's the reality. And you have to be able to align what you're offering with what people want. And it's challenging because there are two situations, particularly from our perspective. As martial artists, very often we have a very noble objective, which is to help people grow and develop. And that doesn't always marry as well with the business interest, which is, of course, maximizing profitability. So if you are running a business, you have to know martial art as a business, that is. If you're running martial arts as a business, you have to know what your true objectives are. If you wish to get wealthy, then you have to adapt what you teach to really satisfy the demands of the market. If you wish to help people grow, develop, and enlighten and embody and improve themselves,
okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate. Is that not a euphemism for selling out?
No, it's not necessarily. I used to think so. I used to think that, and I used to operate in that way. And then I came to this realization.
What changed?
If I approach 5, 10 persons and I only take 10 people who I think are really serious about learning the martial art, then that's 10 people I affect. If I teach 100 people, of whom maybe I may only get 10 who go on to be really serious about the martial art, have I affected only those 10 people, or have I affected the 100? Because looking back over the stories, and we have students who come in or through our doors and they leave all the time, for different reasons. And some of them are there for a long time.
Right.
Some of them are there for a short period. But did we not influence those who were there for a short period? Because I have students who come back to me years later and tell me how their training with me for that 6 months or that 3 months or that year or that 2 years has influenced their whole approach to life going forward. So I may not have gotten the result that I was looking for as a teacher, but they got
Right.
benefit that they were looking for from the process. So I don't know that that means that really and truly we were ineffectual or that we sold out.
Okay. So, all right. So since you consider there to be similarities between the two, how back in the days of the controversy between original Jeet Kune Do and Jeet Kune Do concepts, let's say, right? Did you have any personal experience? Were there people in Barbados telling you that, oh, well, you're this version of Jeet Kune Do as opposed to the other version of Jeet Kune Do? That's the first part of this question. And then the second part is, what was/is your whole opinion on that controversy?
Well, again, firstly, Barbados, there aren't that many people who are actually involved in the process of JKD. And I'm going to say the process.
Right.
So it was not I was not as affected, but of course there's always that one person who's read the books, who's done whatever, and if they've read the books and watched every Bruce Lee movie and can mimic everything Bruce Lee did on film, then their JKD is the real JKD, and what you're doing is not. So there is at least one person like that here, and I have tried initially over the years to try to invite them to the process, which they have not done, because it's very difficult sometimes when you've been doing something. If you've been doing something in a particular way for 20, 30 years, it's hard sometimes to turn around and say, okay, no, let me start over. So that person, that really, they're still doing what they do in the way they do it, and they're happy doing it that way. So who am I to try to change them? In terms
so then what your personal opinion on it?
My personal opinion is this. Potato. That is my opinion. Everybody.
Although, have you ever come across anybody who uses the word potato?
I can't say. I besides myself, maybe not.
You see, I think tomato is more accurate.
Okay.
Right?
My wife is here correcting me too. Don't worry. What I'm going to say is, for me, with the JKD concepts, JKD, original JKD, all of that was going on back in the early 90s. For me, I was, because of where I am, I'm, even in the island chain, we're way off to the east of everybody else. I was able to objectively look and observe what was going on, read all the comments and stuff that were going on through that process. And for me, this is my take on it. Okay, and this is just my take on it. And mind you, I'm seeing it repeated today. When you get stuck.
Really?
Yeah. When you get stuck doing something and not furthering your knowledge base, then you get very comfortable doing what you do. But if I'm your student, for example, Sifa, let me just put it this way. I'm your student. for the most part, I know most of what you teach. I don't know everything because obviously, you know, as Muhammad Ali said, I said I taught him everything he knows. I taught him. Pardon? You know, you may not have taught me everything you know. You just taught me everything I know. But um, in terms of the process, what you have experienced, you shared most of that because you've never been really selfish with the knowledge. So I have that knowledge that you would have taught me. Now I can stick to just that and continue to train in that and become very good at that.
Right.
But I could also add to the knowledge that you gave me and add other things to it, which I believe is what should be done. Now,
Right.
some people in the process
and which is what it's
well, it should be expected. It should be expected. I don't know if it always is because what's happened is, for me, the persons who define themselves as original JKD, we do it the way Bruce Lee taught it, got stuck in a rut, so to speak, doing just that. And so when other things were introduced to them, they forgot to add what is specifically your own creation part of it. And so what happened was another
I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay, I'm
glad
losing
you brought that up.
Uh-huh.
Because I want to ask you for your take on something else that we hear about all the time. This oft-used quote, "Be water, my friend."
Well, we will get there. Finishing this thought, though.
No, let's go to that one.
Be water, my friend.
Let's go to that one.
Yeah. Water can flow.
It's all over everybody.
Well, you know, it's easy to quote. I have lots of quotes. I love them. Every time I go to LA, Sifudan says something, I write it down as a quote, and I keep it because quotes are cool.
Yeah.
You know, and I like to answer everything. My wife will tell you in a song or in a quote. So, you know, it saves me having to explain myself. You just go figure it out. Be water, my friend. You know, water can flow, or it can creep, or it can crash. It's the adaptable nature of being adaptable. Really, that's what it's like. Not going against the grain, but being able to go with the tide. And you know, so people borrow it from Bruce Lee, and they say, oh well, you know, Bruce Lee said be like water, so I'll do this and I can do that and I can do the third and I can do the next. But the reality is there must always be what we call a common thread. I can't remember where I read that many years ago, but in everything you do within Jeet Kune, there must be a common thread, something that unites or connects everything you do. There must be a purpose to the process.
You know where that? I believe that's from Chris Kent and Tim Tackett's Jeet Kune book. I think that's either in the Jeet Kune kickboxing or in the Junfan Jeet Kune, the textbook. That actual common thread phrase.
Yeah. I
think that's where that's from.
Possibly, or one of my articles in Black Belt magazine. I'm not sure. Somewhere in there, but it was one of our people that said it for sure. That I know. It was definitely a JK stalwart. Yeah. So you have to have the common thread. So the whole notion of being adaptable and doing a bit of this, you know, that's not what I'm advocating. I'm not advocating that you jump on the bandwagon of what is most popular right now. But what I'm saying is the part of the process of Jeet Kune is researching and adapting and always seeking to find a better way. That does not mean that in seeking to find a better way that you will find a better way. Some things are just great, but isn't it good to validate that fact? If Kali, which I tend to think is, you know, you can pretty much, in my opinion, express Jeet Kune without going outside of the Filipino martial arts. That is my own opinion. So I don't need to say, I don't know that if you go outside of FMA that you will necessarily find anything better, but that process of going outside and discovering and experimenting and validating that you don't need to do that, isn't that just as important? So even so, that process of expanding your thinking, expanding your learning experience is key. And if you do find something that is better, then embrace it. You know, embrace it. Add it to what you do. For me, for example, I remember, for example, I remember back in the 80, back when I started training with you initially, I was also doing gymnastics at school. And so
Right.
while I was warming up, I would do a cartwheel or Arab spring and stuff in the warm up. And you would say, that gymnastic stuff you're doing, that, you know, and, you know, you were not very keen on gymnastics, you know.
That's
that
because
movement,
I do that stuff myself. I was jealous.
right, as being combative, you see. But that interest in the gymnastics led me to capoeira. Now,
Right.
there is a lot in capoeira that many of us cannot do because it's physically challenging. But there's a training method that I learned timing and distancing so well from the process of capoeira, learning to play close and avoid kicks and stuff, that training method has been phenomenal. It's enhanced my martial arts skills tremendously.
Right.
And that was going outside of something that was the norm of what JKD people at the time was doing. And it helped. Now, and that is true for a lot, that can be true for a lot of other disciplines. So part of the process of JKD is that continuous research. And sometimes, just like any experiment in science, you're going to get a negative result. But you know, as I say to my students all the time, when you carry out an experiment in chemistry, no reaction is a very important result because it tells you, you know, what is that gas.
There's that Harrison College education coming out.
maybe I don't know.
Again, making me jealous because I failed chemistry. I don't have an O-level chemistry, you know, right?
Oh, well,
okay,
I was lucky. I passed. But yeah, but you want to know which gases don't react together, what chemicals don't react together, because then you'll know what to use in certain circumstances not to create an explosion, you know? So you might try, you may study, you may experiment with a martial art and find that there's nothing in it for you. But at least you have an understanding of it, you can appreciate it, you can have some respect of what they do, or you can be critical of what they do, what they're doing, but you're speaking from a position of knowledge, you know, and that
just made me think of something. How are things going with my Shotokan friends in Barbados?
Well, that's the politics of stuff. Right now, there are now two factions because they're broken, they're split, and there are now two actual factions of Shotokan in Barbados.
Well, there should be three now.
Well, yeah, if you consider, well, there's one I don't really think too much of in terms of that.
Okay.
Simply because, you know, that's basically a one-man show, and, you know, its growth has been very limited. You haven't seen a lot of growth in that particular group, although initially I had high hopes for them.
Right. But
now since then, of the major what they call BSKF group, they broke into two. There's the Okazaki brand group now, and then there's the one that stays loyal to the, I think it's what the JKA. So apparently there was a split a couple of years ago, and the Caribbean people in Shotokan, who are in essence some of the highest ranked people in Shotokan worldwide, basically split to form their own organization. Part of that being, I suspect, from what I understand, that they weren't really getting the support and the advancement that they believe they should for their rank. Because, you know, in some systems, in some martial arts systems, unless you are of that ethnicity, you really can only go so far.
I get it. Okay. All right. So like I was saying, I know you got to get your weekend started. So I just have a few more questions for it. So here's one. If you had to do this all over again, right? This is related to a second question. If you had to do, based on what you now know and what you've learned, what is there that you would do differently, if anything?
From a training perspective,
Okay.
be more disciplined, because that's something I was saying to my students. Yeah, I was saying to my students, because when you get into the role of teacher, sometimes you focus so much on the teaching that you forget to focus on the self-development.
Okay.
So when I look back now, having been in martial arts for what, 39 years, and in JKD for about 33, what I have come to realize is that I could be so much further ahead in my personal development than I am, which is, because it's easy to rest on your laurels,
Right.
But that's one thing I would say. From a business perspective, I think I would have approached it a little differently. I think I would have accumulated mass first before I actually sought to open a school. I operated on the premise, build it and they will come. That was my premise. That JKD is such a great discipline that anybody with a modicum of common sense would recognize how great it was, and they would automatically gravitate to it. No.
Yeah.
The world has
Don't
more.
worry. We make that mistake here too.
Yeah. There are far more sheep in the world than there are shepherds. And that's
one of the reasons why we're doing the work that we're doing here at I Love Jeet Kune, because it's probably going to be always an uphill battle, because I think that the art, the philosophy of the art, the history of the art, the way that the art has been put out there, it's almost as if it has like built-in obstacles, in spite of it being the art and philosophy of one of the world's best known and most admired martial artists.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think part of that process is sometimes misunderstanding of what was intended when certain things were said. That's how I would put it.
Right. Okay. So now here's the follow-on to that first question. All right. So listen to this carefully. You know how people sometimes talk about, if I could come back with the brain, if I could come back with the brain that I have, right, then such and such. So that's part of the scenario. You're not going to get to come back with the brain that you've developed, but you do get to come back, and you have a choice. You have two choices. You can pick a skill, and you can pick a human quality. Now, I really should have given you like 5 days to think about that. It's not fair to put it on you right towards the end of an interview. But listen to it again. You get to come back. Based on the knowledge and the brain that you have now, you can set up your comeback with one skill and one human quality. You have an answer for that?
Well, skill and quality, pretty much the same. Empathy.
That's it?
That's it.
Empathy, not a skill?
Empathy, the ability to empathize with people. Some of us have a lot of difficulty doing that. That can be a skill. You see, the ability to listen. Yeah. Okay, I'll put it that way. The skill is the ability to listen to other people, and the skill is empathy. And the quality is empathy.
Okay.
Because
jeez, I should have known. I should have known better.
My kids
I should have known better. Okay.
My kids are my best example, Sifu. And one thing I've come to appreciate
Yeah.
with teaching children, if you give
Yeah.
them your undivided attention for just 1 minute, they will give you their undivided attention forever. That's reality.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so the ability to actually listen to someone, listen to them and hear what they have to say and show interest. And I know mind you, I'm preaching. That does not mean I'm the best example of this, but I have with my kids. You listen to them. How was your day and whatever, and then you empathize with them, and then
Right.
they will give you their attention, and you can shape them at that point because they want to know that you are really interested in what they have to say, no matter how silly it may seem to you.
Okay. So, all right, just a couple more easy questions. Who are your Jeet Kune heroes and why?
JKD heroes. First and foremost, Dwight Woods.
Oh, very nice of you to say.
Oh,
I didn't ask you that for that reply. Okay.
No, very true. In many ways, what I've learned from you, and some of those were hard lessons to learn, have helped to shape me to be. Self-sufficiency, for example, is one of the most important qualities that I've developed over time. And that is what I learned from you, because you never coddled me. You never spoon-fed me. You made me really work to gain the knowledge and to really, examine myself and examine what I was doing. That I'm leaving I'm leaving Barbados in another month. Really threw me into the deep end of the ocean, so to speak.
No, it wasn't a month. I gave you more than a month.
Well, it seemed like a month. Let's put it that way.
Oh,
right?
No, I don't. I gave you more than a month.
It seemed like a month.
But just so you know,
but nevertheless,
in case I never told you, I felt really bad about having to leave, but I had to. I mean, there was it was this adventure.
Well,
right.
Some people are there for a time, for a reason, and for a season, and that's what we have to remember. So you were there.
Okay, Mr.
For a little. The journey was that was a necessary part of my journey as much as it was a necessary part of your journey. And I may not have become as competent as I am today were you still there. Because I observe this when I travel. There are people when I travel and I do seminars and stuff. There are people who have access to the knowledge on practically a daily basis who seem not to grow in the knowledge of JKD, as opposed to myself, who may have access once per annum to train with Sifu Dan and train with you and so on, who really hold on and grasp every kernel of knowledge and skill that they can from you and grow. So,
favorite Jeet Kune book?
Favorite Jeet Kune book, Absorb What Is Useful. Daniel San.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I might have to do a book report on the broadcast about that though. You just gave me an idea. Okay. How do you apply the Jeet Kune philosophy outside, or an aspect of the Jeet Kune philosophy outside of martial arts?
JKD is life. As I say to people, I don't do Jeet Kune, I am Jeet Kune. So every facet of it, every principle or philosophy that you can find in the art, I try to apply. I live it. So I research my own experience and everything as much as possible. I try to not be too critical initially of anything until I've taken the time to really ingest it and investigate it. And I try at the end of the process to adapt and make it my own, because that's the whole process. We're not meant to be clones of Bruce Lee or clones of Dan Inosanto or clones of Dwight Woods or clones of even my students Wayne and Quentin. We are supposed to express and experience in our own way, because in our own unique way, based on who we are physically, in terms of our character, in terms of our talents, in terms of our technical abilities. That's what we're supposed to do. So at the end of the day, I just put everything through the JKD filter. And that's like I like to say, JKD is a filter, you know, and we put everything through that filter and extract the essence of it. And that's why I always find it interesting, because I may say in many arts, I mean, Daniel Asano is an amazing individual. And I think what people don't appreciate, and this is part of the challenge of JKD, I think, is that a lot of people who are JKD, who are expressing or doing JKD, do not necessarily know it by that name. You know, they think that the Filipino martial arts they practice is purely Filipino martial arts. They don't realize that that is the Filipino martial arts through the JKD filter. They don't understand that what they're doing is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu through the JKD filter. They don't understand what they're doing.
You know what I call that?
JKD filter.
I refer to so like Salem Astley, for example, he calls things Jeet Kune associated disciplines, right? Well, and I'm not sure if it's because of him or not, but I've often tried to explain to people that these associated disciplines are Jeet Kune training methods. So Filipino Kali for us is a Jeet Kune training method. Muay Thai is a Jeet Kune training method. Whereas for other people, they might be standalone arts.
Yeah.
Is it similar to what you're talking about?
Correct. You know, because when you put JKD, when you put any martial art through the JKD filter, what you get is something better. That might be my biased opinion, that is my truth. Okay? And okay. I've seen it.
You could be biased on
I've seen it through so many arts and some people are honest enough they're honest to say it to you, but they're not necessarily they don't necessarily express it as honestly when they're promoting themselves, because obviously everybody's about branding, you know, so everybody wants their own particular brand to stand out and to attract the rewards.
We're gonna have to talk about that in interview number 2. When this has been that I knew that you were the perfect choice for episode 1. Seriously, I knew that going into it, right? But I don't want to take up too much more time of your I know you got people to deal with over the week, right? So where can people? What's the best way for people to get information on you, or even possibly get in touch with you?
Well, we have a Facebook page, and we're on Instagram. We have 2 Facebook pages, actually. I would say go to the capital UMAA Barbados page. That's the official page, and you can contact us there. We're on Instagram, so you can find us on Instagram and send us a message via Messenger. I get it eventually. I am
right, yeah, because you're worse at the online stuff than I am.
Yes.
And I've come a long way.
That's
you know,
I'm now in the process of catching up. I'm not opposed to technology, but I'm busy. I prefer to be I actually prefer to be on the floor teaching. So I spend most of my time and my intent there, and you can get caught up in the social media stuff very easly. So I have to be very cautious.
You remind me of somebody that we have posed for pictures with from time.
I think he and I have quite a bit in common in that regard. Teaching is learning. Teaching is a passion. Learning is a passion. I prefer to do that. If I could get paid to teach to train, if you could pay me to be a professional student, I would do that. You know, and I love learning. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
that's the perfect gig.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
You know, that would be my world to do that. You know,
All right.
and that's he's
All right.
like that too, very much so. And
Yes.
maybe I picked that up from him. And people don't understand that his process of learning and different arts isn't necessarily for you to follow that path of doing everything he does. It's just that's him. He loves to learn, and as soon as he's learned something and something else presents itself and the opportunity presents itself, he's gonna do that. And that's me. Everything I can learn.
No, again, I'm biased. I'm biased towards you, but to me, it's somewhat amazing that you can pick up on that from 6,000 miles away or 3,000 miles, however much it is, right? And then there are people a lot closer, literally and figuratively, who might not really get that, you know, and that's going to be one of the ongoing debates, right, in this world.
Yeah, well, that's
right?
the challenge.
Anyhow,
leaders and followers, just remember, and as I like to say it all the time, I don't train sheep, I teach shepherds. That's what I'm saying all the time.
Got it. All right. Okay. I'm gonna end it here, my friend. That's it. That's it. Everybody who tuned in, thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to check out the special offers that we have for you at ilovejeetkundo.com. Next week we'll start putting the broadcast next week up on the YouTube. The audio versions we'll start putting on SoundCloud, I think is one of the platforms, and then Podient. And so you'll have a number of other ways to start the I Love Jeet Kune content. Wayne, thanks again for being a wonderful episode 1 guest. We'll talk again soon and get some other things. And I can definitely see that people will want me to interview you again.
Oh, well, I'm happy to help in any way. Thanks, Sifu. Really appreciate it. And of course,
everybody, yeah.
Everything that you've taught over the years. You know, I have grown tremendously. I don't think I would be the same person if you were not in my life. So, and
I appreciate
a lot of people who've been in my life that have not been that experienced, you know, have not brought that much to the table. So,
thank
you for all you've done and the process of which you've taught, the process of teaching me. I remember you saying this early in learning with you, that, you know, you weren't feeding me, you were teaching me how to fish, you know, and you've done a fantastic job of doing that, because I am able to feed myself, and now in the process of martial art and martial arts study, you know,
right.
I know
Thanks.
I've been able to develop and add what is specifically my own.
All right, cool. Okay, we'll talk soon, all right?
Yes, sir. All right.
Okay, all right, take care.
Bye-bye.